My brother got my fiancée pregnant before our wedding. Now my whole family wants me to forgive them, but I told them to fuck off, and I moved away. This is going to be a long story. And yeah, it's just as crazy as it sounds. I'll try to be as succinct as possible, but there's a lot to cover here. I honestly don't care if anyone believes this or not. It's so absurd that I just need to vent. Also, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything, but I will leave out any specifics that could identify me to anyone unfamiliar with the situation. I'm 32 years old, and until just a few months ago, I was engaged to my girlfriend of 5 years. Let's call her Sarah. My younger brother, Brian, is 29, and he's always been the golden child in our family. To understand how deep this betrayal cut, you need to know a bit about how I grew up and how we got to this point. Growing up, Brian could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I was constantly punished and criticized for the smallest things. This wasn't your typical sibling rivalry or light favoritism. It was blatant, constant, brutal. Brian would break something. I'd get blamed. He'd start a fight. I'd get grounded. If we both got straight A's, he'd get a new gaming console, and I'd get a pat on the back and a reminder to keep it up. Our parents, David and Karen, always had an excuse. Brian's younger. He needs more attention. You're the older one. You should know better. Brian's more sensitive. We have to be careful with him. The relentless gaslighting and unfair standards made me feel invisible in my own home. As we got older, the favoritism only became more obvious. When I got into a decent college on a partial scholarship, my parents barely said a word. But when Brian decided to attend a community college, they threw him a party and bought him a car. They never mentioned the fact that I'd been biking 5 miles to my part-time job for years. I moved out as soon as I could. I worked 2 jobs through college and took out loans to survive. Brian dropped out after 1 semester, claiming college wasn't for him. And our parents? They praised him, said he was brave for going against the grain and knowing himself. They even bankrolled his string of failed business ideas over the next few years. No matter how far I tried to get from my toxic family, they always found ways to pull me back in. Holiday dinners were the worst, full of subtle digs and toxic comparisons. Oh, still at that entry-level job? Brian's thinking of starting another business. He's very entrepreneurial. Never mind that I was steadily building a real career, while Brian was draining their retirement accounts. Still, I tried to keep some kind of relationship with Brian. He was my brother after all, but it was always one-sided. I'd reach out and he'd ghost me, or he'd twist the conversation into some weird competition. If I got a promotion, suddenly he had a huge opportunity. If I started dating someone, he'd immediately be in a serious relationship. I actually met Sarah while trying to reconnect with Brian. She was a friend of one of his very short-lived girlfriends, and we hit it off immediately. Sarah was everything I ever wanted. Smart, funny, kind, and absolutely beautiful. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely valued. Seen. Of course, my parents weren't thrilled. They'd make passive-aggressive comments like, "She's way out of your league. What does she see in you anyway?" Brian, on the other hand, suddenly became very interested in my life. He kept asking about Sarah, wanted to know all about her. At the time, I was just relieved that he finally seemed to care about something in my life. Looking back, that should have been the first red flag. Sarah and I moved in together after about a year. It was great. We had stable jobs, traveled, and started planning our future. I proposed to her on our 4th anniversary. It was nothing extravagant, just a quiet dinner at home and a heartfelt speech. She said yes. I was over the moon. We weren't in a rush. We wanted a long engagement so we could save up for the wedding and maybe even a down payment on a house. When we told my family, their reactions were mixed. My mum forced a fake smile and said, "Oh, how nice," like someone had told her I adopted a stray dog. My dad grunted and muttered, "Good luck with that," then went back to watching TV. Brian, though, he smiled. But there was something off about it. Predatory almost. I ignored it. Thought I was just being paranoid. The next year was a blur of wedding planning and job stress. Sarah and I were both working long hours to build our savings. We didn't see each other as much, but I figured it was just a rough patch. Every couple has them, right? In hindsight, the signs were all there. She was distant, always on her phone, giggling at texts from business friends. She started going out more, late nights, reeking of wine and cologne. But I trusted her, completely. I never imagined she'd cheat on me, let alone with my brother. Then about 4 months ago, everything changed. Sarah became moody, nauseous all the time. I thought maybe she was pregnant. We hadn't been trying, but we'd talked about kids someday. I got excited, started thinking about nursery colors and baby names. Then one night, she sat me down. She was crying, shaking, and then she dropped the bomb. She was pregnant, but it wasn't mine. I was frozen. We hadn't been intimate for a while because of our schedules, but I never once suspected she was cheating. I asked her who the father was. She whispered, "It's Brian." My entire world collapsed. Everything I'd built, everything I thought I knew, was a lie. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. Sarah kept talking, between sobs, trying to explain. It started at our engagement party. Brian told her she was making a mistake marrying me. He preyed on her insecurities, said he could give her a better life, that he could give her things I couldn't. It wasn't a one-time thing. They'd been sleeping together for months. I threw her out that night. I couldn't look at her. Couldn't be in the same room with the woman who wore my ring while screwing my brother. She begged me to forgive her, said it was a mistake, said she loved me. But all I could see were the lies. All I could think about were the nights she came home to me, after being with him. After Sarah left, I called Brian. I can't even remember what I said. It was all a blur of rage and heartbreak. Brian tried to brush it off at first, calling it a drunken mistake that didn't mean anything. But when I pressed him, really pressed him, he snapped. "Well," he said, "maybe if you'd been a better fiancé, she wouldn't have come to me." I saw red. I jumped into my car and drove straight to his apartment, determined to confront him. I don't even know what I planned to do. All I knew was that I needed to make him regret what he said. But when I got there, our parents were already there. Turns out, Brian had called them first, told them his version, that Sarah had seduced him and that he felt so guilty. And you know what? They believed him. Of course they did. They always do. My mum immediately launched into a lecture about family and forgiveness. My dad just stood there, arms crossed, disappointed in me, not in Brian, never in Brian. I tried to tell them what really happened, but they refused to listen. They told me I needed to forgive Brian and support Sarah through her pregnancy because, and I quote, "family comes first." That was it. I lost it. Years of resentment, of feeling second best, of swallowing their favoritism. It all came pouring out. I told them exactly how I felt, how twisted their loyalty was, how they'd always chosen Brian, how they'd never once stood up for me. I turned to Brian and told him he was dead to me. And I told my parents they could finally have the son they always wanted, because they didn't have me anymore. I stormed out, ignoring their cries and desperate pleas. I drove for hours, no destination. I just needed to get away from everything. When I finally got home, there were dozens of missed calls and texts. Sarah begged for another chance. Brian flip-flopped between apologies and blame, but the worst, the most, came from my parents. They demanded I grow up, that I do the right thing, that I make peace. I ignored them all. I stopped eating, barely slept. I called in sick and burned through all my vacation days. I couldn't face the world. I couldn't explain this to anyone. I just sat, in silence, replaying every moment with Sarah, every interaction with Brian, trying to figure out where I went wrong. It's been 3 months now. I've moved to a new apartment, changed my number, started therapy. But my family won't stop. Despite my efforts to go no contact, they keep showing up. They've ambushed me at work, literally waited in the parking lot. My mum wails about how I'm tearing the family apart. My dad leaves angry voicemails telling me to man up and forgive Brian. Brian himself has tried to confront me more than once, but I've managed to avoid him. They've even started sending extended family, people I haven't spoken to in years, to guilt trip me. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all suddenly popping up to say the same things. Family is important. Let it go. Forgive and move on. It's like they live in a different reality. One where Brian and Sarah just made a small mistake, not a catastrophic betrayal. Yesterday, I got a letter from Sarah. She's keeping the baby. She and Brian are going to co-parent. And guess what? My parents are thrilled. They're over the moon to become grandparents, totally forgetting the way this happened. The letter was full of apologies and explanations. How she and Brian found real love through this terrible situation. She even had the nerve to say she hopes we can all be friends someday, for the child's sake. I'm at my breaking point. Part of me wants to vanish, move to another state, change my name, and build a new life where none of this ever happened. But another part of me wants to stay, to fight, to make sure they understand just how sick this whole situation is. Right now, I feel like I'm drowning. I can't be alone with my thoughts. Dating? Not even on my radar. I don't know if I'll ever trust someone again. I've lost friends over this. People who think I should just be the bigger person and fix things, as if I'm the one who broke everything. The idea of Sarah and Brian raising a kid together, a child that could have been mine, it's like being stabbed in the gut over and over again. I know, logically, the baby is innocent, but emotionally, I can't feel good about it. And now my parents are talking about how I should be involved, how I'll be the child's uncle. The thought makes me sick. How am I supposed to look at that child and not see the living symbol of betrayal? So Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to forgive my brother and my ex-fiancé? Am I wrong for wanting to cut ties with my entire family? Any advice would be appreciated, because right now, I feel like I'm screaming into a void, and no one sees how messed up this really is. If you've read this far, thank you. Writing this out has been weirdly cathartic. Holy hell, this blew up overnight. Thank you all for the advice and support. I'm honestly overwhelmed and so grateful. Let me answer a few common questions. Yes, I've spoken to a lawyer about getting a restraining order. It's in the works. No, I don't plan on having any contact with the baby. It's not the kid's fault, but I can't go down that road and keep my sanity. HR at my job is aware of the situation and fully supportive. There's security at the front desk now, and they've offered me more remote work flexibility. I'm absolutely considering relocating to another state. My company has offices elsewhere, so a transfer might be possible. I'm weighing my options. Several people suggested a DNA test, but Sarah admitted the affair, and the timing lines up. I don't need more proof. Even if the child were mine, I honestly don't think I could raise it. I've been stunned by how many of you have gone through similar betrayals. It's heartbreaking, but oddly comforting to know I'm not alone. Someone asked if I could sue Brian for alienation of affection. I checked. It's not recognized in my state, and honestly, I don't have the energy for a lawsuit right now. A few people have pointed out that Brian's behavior seems narcissistic. Yeah, I'm starting to see it too. I've started reading about narcissistic personality disorder, and honestly, a lot of it checks out. It doesn't excuse Brian's actions, but it helps me understand them, at least a little. 9. For those asking about Sarah's family, they were just as shocked and disgusted as you'd expect. They've completely cut her off, and they've reached out to offer their support to me. It's a small comfort, but it means a lot. 10. Someone asked if I'd ever want to have kids of my own someday. To be honest, this whole experience has made me question if I even want a family. But I'm trying not to make any big life decisions while I'm still processing everything. I'll keep you updated if anything major happens. Right now, my focus is just on healing and trying to move forward. Thank you again, Reddit. Your advice, your words of encouragement, you have no idea how much they've helped. Even if I can't respond to everyone, please know. I read every single comment, and they make me feel less alone. It's been about 2 weeks since my last post, and it's been an absolute roller coaster. First off, thank you. Truly. I never expected my story to blow up like that, and your messages have been both heartbreaking and weirdly reassuring. It's horrifying how common this kind of betrayal is. Anyway, a lot has happened. Remember how I mentioned working on a restraining order? Yeah, that turned into a whole mess. My lawyer filed the paperwork, and we had a court date set. I thought it would be straightforward, given the non-stop harassment and the mountain of evidence I had. But I underestimated them. My parents showed up at the hearing with their own lawyer. Some slick-talking suit who probably makes more per hour than I do in a week. They painted me as the crazy one, said I was tearing the family apart over a simple misunderstanding, like Brian had just tripped and fallen into my fiancé. Thankfully, the judge didn't buy it. She granted the restraining order against both Brian and my parents, but not before my mother burst into tears in court. And my dad looked at me like I'd just murdered someone. Brian? His expression could have killed me on the spot. As we were leaving, he tried to approach me. My lawyer stepped between us and reminded him, clearly, that there was now a court order. Brian just laughed. "This isn't over," he said. "You can't hide behind a piece of paper forever." I'd be lying if I said his words didn't get under my skin. But at least I have some legal protection now. Then there's my job. Remember how I said my family kept showing up at my office? Well, that finally came to a head. I was in a client meeting when my assistant pinged me. "Your mum's in the lobby. She's causing a scene." I rushed out and found her surrounded by confused and uncomfortable co-workers. She had brought a photo album, was literally showing baby pictures of Brian and me, crying, rambling about how close her boys used to be. She was in the middle of telling a story about how we used to bathe together as toddlers. When she saw me, she ran toward me, talking about planning a baby shower. I stopped her cold. Told her if she didn't leave immediately, I'd call the cops and have her arrested for trespassing and violating the restraining order. The look on her face, like I'd slapped her. But after everything they've put me through, I didn't care. Security escorted her out. Then I spent the next hour doing damage control with my boss and co-workers. Most of them were sympathetic, but I could tell some were wondering if I was bringing drama into the workplace. But the worst part, the fight with Brian. Last Saturday, I was at the gym, working out some frustration on the punching bag. I didn't even notice him until I heard his voice behind me. I turned, and there he was, smirking, like this was all some game. He started talking, loud enough for everyone around us to hear. I told him to leave or I'd call the police. He laughed, said he'd tell them I threatened him and Sarah. I lost it. I threw a punch, caught him right in the jaw. He stumbled back and then lunged at me. We went to the ground, fists flying, like we were kids again. Except now, there were no parents to separate us. No one telling me to be the bigger person. I got in a few solid hits before the gym staff pulled us apart. Brian's nose was bleeding. My eye was swelling shut. We were both screaming, trying to get free and go another round. The gym manager threatened to call the cops. That snapped me out of it. I grabbed my stuff and ran. I was still shaking, adrenaline pumping, when I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Sarah, screaming, furious, telling me I had broken Brian's nose and that he might need surgery. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The fact that she was mad at me, after everything they did, it was too much. I told her I was sorry if her little boyfriend got hurt, the same one she'd been cheating on me with for months. She started crying, talking about how stressed she was, how the baby could feel her pain, how I was the selfish one. I hung up, blocked her number. The fallout from the fight has been insane. Word spread fast. Friends and relatives started blowing up my phone. Some supported me. Others scolded me for attacking my poor, innocent brother. Sarah's parents reached out again, said they still supported me and were deeply disappointed in their daughter. It's a small consolation, but right now, I'll take what I can get. The restraining order doesn't feel like enough anymore. Brian's already proven he'll break it, and I'm genuinely worried about what he'll try next. The legal mess has gotten worse. My lawyer called the day after the gym fight. Brian's pressing assault charges against me. I explained what happened, that he violated the restraining order, that he provoked me. My lawyer sighed and said, "We'll fight it, but it's going to be tough. You threw the first punch." We're filing our own charges against him for violating the restraining order. My lawyer thinks this will help, but nothing's guaranteed. I've had to give statements to police, show them my injuries, explain why I hit my own brother. It's humiliating. Brian and I have been banned from the gym for life. I get it, but it sucks. The gym was one of the only places I felt like I could process everything in a healthy way. And now, even my cousin Amy, one of the few family members still in my corner, is facing backlash. Her parents are pressuring her to drop the drama and stop supporting me. But she called me yesterday. But Amy's standing her ground. She told me what's really been going on behind the scenes. Apparently, my parents have been telling everyone that I'm having some kind of mental breakdown. That Sarah and Brian only got together after she and I broke up. And that I'm just bitter and can't let go. According to Amy, most of the extended family is skeptical. But a few, they're buying it. It's maddening, knowing they're spinning lies while I'm just trying to heal. Things at work haven't been easy either. After the incident with my mum showing up in the lobby, and the fight with Brian that went semi-viral on local Facebook pages, I can feel the tension when I walk into the office. People glance at me like I'm a bomb waiting to go off. Earlier this week, my manager called me in. He started by saying he values me, that he understands I'm going through a difficult time. Then came the blow. He thinks I should take a leave of absence. Call it a personal sabbatical. Paid, of course. I wanted to fight him on it, tell him that work is the only thing keeping me sane right now. But I could tell the decision had already been made. So I thanked him for his understanding and packed up my office. As I walked out, I overheard two co-workers whispering about how my brother got my fiancée pregnant. I slammed my office door harder than necessary. Took a small, bitter satisfaction in watching them jump. I won't lie, this is all taking a toll on me. I've started taking long drives at night, just to get out of my apartment. Sometimes, I find myself parked outside the place Sarah and I used to share, staring up at the windows, wondering how the hell my life got so twisted. Then, out of nowhere, came an unexpected ally. Emma, Sarah's younger sister, reached out on social media. At first, I was suspicious. Was this another manipulation? Some trick? But Emma quickly made it clear. She was just as disgusted by Sarah and Brian as I was. She apologized for her sister's actions and offered her support. She's been keeping me informed on what's happening in their lives. Apparently, Sarah and Brian have moved in together, living like they didn't just blow up multiple people's lives to play house. Emma says Sarah's been painting herself as the victim, crying to anyone who will listen about how she never meant to hurt anyone, and how she and Brian are soulmates who found each other against all odds. It makes me want to puke, but I appreciate Emma's updates. Even if the truth hurts, information is still power. The social media fallout has been its own nightmare. I've always been a private person, but this mess dragged me into a spotlight I never asked for. Someone, probably one of Brian's buddies, posted about our gym fight on a local Facebook group. No names were mentioned, but the details were specific enough that anyone who knows us knew exactly who it was about. The comment section became a war zone. Some people defended me, said Brian got what he deserved. Others said I was unhinged, dangerous, needed to be locked up. One night, after too many beers, I made the mistake of reading through the comments. I ended up throwing my phone so hard across the room that the screen shattered. After that, I deleted almost all of my social media accounts. I couldn't take the endless pings and messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, now suddenly very curious about the drama. With everything that has happened, I've come to one conclusion. I can't stay in this city anymore. Too many ghosts. Too many chances of running into Sarah, Brian, or, God forbid, my parents. I've started looking into internal transfers. And there's an opening in our Seattle office. Not my first choice. I've never liked endless rain. But right now, I'd move to the moon just to escape all this. I haven't made anything official yet. But the idea of a clean slate, a new city, a new apartment, a new life, where no one knows me as the guy whose brother slept with his fiancée, it's tempting. Since the restraining order was granted, my parents have been eerily silent. It's like they're regrouping, planning their next move. I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Meanwhile, Sarah's been blasting her pregnancy all over social media. Emma tells me she's been posting ultrasound pics, baby bump selfies, gushing captions about how blessed she and Brian are, and how excited they are to start a family. Each post, like a knife to the chest. Every time I start to feel like I'm finally healing, some new detail punches me right back to square one. So that's where I'm at. 2 weeks ago, I didn't think things could get worse, but they did. I'm still angry, still hurt, but more than anything, I'm exhausted. I'm tired of explaining myself, tired of defending my sanity, tired of the gaslighting, tired of pretending that I'm okay. I don't even know what this post is anymore. A cry into the void, a desperate vent session, or maybe just one last update before I try to move on. Whatever it is, I'll say this. Reddit, you've helped me more than you know. You reminded me that good people still exist, that I'm not crazy, that I'm not alone. It's been about a week since my last update, and I think this will be my final post on this whole disaster. First, thank you. From the bottom of my heart. Your words, advice, and encouragement were a lifeline during the darkest days of my life. So here it is. I'm relocating. Yep, I finally pulled the trigger. I accepted the transfer to our Seattle office. It wasn't easy, but after everything that's happened, I knew I needed a fresh start. The decision came after a particularly rough day. I had just gotten back from another meeting with my lawyer, still dealing with Brian's assault charges, when I checked my mailbox. There was a letter inside, from Sarah. I almost threw it out, but curiosity got the best of me. Inside was an ultrasound photo and a handwritten note. It said how happy she and Brian were, how excited they were about their baby, and how she hoped I could find it in my heart to be happy for them, that the baby would be so blessed to have its uncle in its life. I saw red. Before I could stop myself, I unblocked her number and called. She picked up on the second ring, and I unleashed everything. I told her exactly what I thought, about her, about Brian, about their beautiful little family. Told her she was delusional if she thought I'd ever want anything to do with that child. Told her that she, Brian, and the baby could all go straight to hell. Was it my proudest moment? No, but it was honest. And afterward, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in months. Closure. That same night, I called my supervisor. Told him I was ready for Seattle. He sounded relieved. I think my supervisor was worried about how all this drama might affect the company. He promised to expedite the transfer, and by the next morning, it was official. I had 2 weeks to pack up my life and move across the country. Word spread fast. My family and social circle found out almost immediately. My parents, unsurprisingly, were furious. They showed up at my place, again, violating the restraining order, trying to talk me out of it. My mum was crying, begging me not to abandon the family. My dad, he was yelling, calling me selfish, immature. I didn't engage, I didn't argue, I just picked up the phone and called the cops. As they were escorted out, my mother shouted, "You'll regret this! Family is everything, and you're throwing it away!" I quietly closed the door behind her and went back to packing. Brian reacted differently. He didn't reach out to me directly, probably because of the legal situation. But he did post a long, self-righteous message on social media, something about how some people can't stand to see others happy, and how he and Sarah were rising above the hate to focus on their beautiful new family. It was clearly aimed at me, a classic I'm the victim narrative. And yeah, I'll admit it stung a little. Seeing how many people liked the post, commented with support, validated his fantasy version of events. But then I reminded myself, they don't know the truth. They never lived in my shoes. Their opinions, they don't matter. The most surprising response, on, came from Sarah. After our explosive phone call, she reached out to Emma, her sister, the one who's been updating me. Apparently, my words hit harder than I thought. According to Emma, Sarah had a full-blown breakdown. She admitted that what she and Brian did was horrible, and that she's scared for the future. Amy, my cousin, God bless her, showed up to help me pack. She even filled me in on more family drama. Turns out, my Aunt Laura, my mum's sister, had a massive argument with my mother. She called her out, said she always favoured Brian, pushed me aside, and now was finally reaping the consequences. Hearing that? Yeah, it felt like validation. Like, for once, someone in the family saw things for what they truly were. My lawyer says the move won't impact our case at all. We're still pursuing charges against Brian for violating the restraining order, and we're fighting back against his assault accusations. He seems confident. Between Brian's repeated violations and my decision to move across the country, the judge will likely see that I'm not a threat, and that Brian is the one who refuses to let go. With any luck, those charges will get thrown out completely. I don't know if I'll post another update after this. Part of starting over means letting go of the past. This community has been a lifeline, more than you know. But I think it's time I close the book on this chapter. I need to focus on rebuilding my life, not rereading the wreckage. So, this is it. Wish me luck, Reddit. I'm heading to Seattle, a brand new city, a brand new start, and I fully intend to make the most of it. Thank you for everything. Thank you for listening, for believing me, for standing by a stranger at his lowest point. Here's to healing. Here's to peace. And here's to never letting people like Brian or Sarah define the rest of our lives.